Marguerite was talented. Absolutely talented. Matter of fact, so talented, many of you don't know this, but Carol and I were talking. As a young girl, her piano teacher could no longer give her lessons. The teacher was simply unqualified to teach her anymore. And that's not an insult to that piano teacher. Marge was simply exceptional. She was an exceptional student, as I mentioned before, not just at piano, but at piano, in school, and at church. Even at 90 years old, she was still a student. One of the things that I learned for years was the minute you stop being a student is the minute you stop learning. And Marge learned all of her life. She was open and willing and humble, willing to be taught at any point. And because of that, that's what made her such a good teacher, because she was able to grow continuously. I remember every time I talked to her, she was as sharp as a tack, always asking questions, always listening. She would always listen to you. And when she spoke, you were wise to listen to her. I never heard an idle word come out of Marge Motter's mouth. When she spoke, you would do well to listen to her. Marge grew up in the Great Depression, and she knew what it was like to go without. And in knowing this, she learned that everything she had was a gift from God. You know, living in the Depression could have made her stingy, but it didn't. She was incredibly generous. If Marge had something, whether it was food, whether it was her home, whether it was her friendship or wisdom, she would share it with you. She didn't hold that in. Carol remembers how good of friends her and Marge were growing up. Each summer they would travel out to Warren and stay with their grandparents and play with the neighborhood children. Now, Marge was a few years older than Carol was, so Marge kind of played with a couple of the other kids, and Carol kind of looked and said, "Oh, wait a minute, I want to hang out with that group of kids." But they ended up having their own friends there during the summertime. But they were very, very close, and they had a lot of fun together. They remained close as they grew up together. Carol recalls how Marge helped her with her children, Jimmy, who was a bit colicky as a baby. She was a bit colicky, and his sister Susan. Marge would come over every day after work, hopping on the bus, because, Marge wasn't driving. So Marge, if she was coming over, she was getting on the bus, or somebody was bringing her a ride, giving her a ride, and she would go over to Carol's house to help with the children. And she loved the children. She was very fond of them. She was always very good with kids, loved kids immensely. She was a very good sister to Carol and to Helen, who preceded Marge in death. At 17 years old, Marge married the love of her life, Al. Now, early on in their marriage, before 1944, Marge actually would drive Al to what was known as the Doodlebug commuter train. It was a commuter train station, and they would go there in their old Model A Ford, and he would board the train, and he would take it to work. At the end of the day, she would come back to the Doodlebug, and she would pick him up. And that lasted, like I said, until about 1944. When one day, she picked him up, got out of the car, walked around to the passenger side, got in, he got in the driver's side, and she never drove again. Marge Motter did not like to drive, and she was not good at driving. But that didn't mean she didn't get around. This woman, I don't care if the snowbanks were 2 feet high, she would get on the bus. She got on the bus, got on the train, would ride with Al or whoever would drive her. Now, Al and Marge didn't have a lot, and at times, honestly, things were tough. For a while after World War II, the family was split up when Al lost his job, and many landlords back in those days would not rent apartments to families who had young children. It was a very difficult time. Because of this, the family didn't have a place to stay, and so they needed to be separated for a while so that everybody had a place to stay. But she was a good mother, and Al was a good father to Nancy, Ellen, and Ted. Growing up, Nancy was a Girl Scout, and Marge was the assistant leader of her Scout pack, so they had lots of mother and daughter time those first 7.5 years of Nancy's life when they lived out in Aurora. Now, a funny story that Nancy was telling me, Marge had a garden and loved to garden. And Nancy would help out with that garden. And to help, I put quotes on help because, see, Nancy as a little girl loved to eat raw peas. All right? Absolutely loved to eat raw peas. So she would pick them right from the garden. So poor Marge is trying to tend the garden and trying to grow these peas. And here Nancy is eating them. And so Marge would get a little bit annoyed with her while she was growing them.
I still like raw peas.
And and that's what I forgot to bring today for the snacks. I'm very sorry. Nancy would love eating the fresh spring peas, and Marge appreciated the help. The family enjoyed going to the zoo quite a bit, and Marguerite was quite fond of elephants. They also camped quite a bit and enjoyed going on picnics together. Well, as has been mentioned several times already, Marge was a very hard worker. Early on, she worked as the office manager for a Ford dealership on Chagrin Boulevard before starting with Ideal Roofing Company. And I think it was mentioned that she was office manager at Ideal Roofing until she was 90 years old. 90 years old. Wow. There are days I pray I don't live to be 90 years old. Okay. And Marge was working there. And I don't mean just showing up and collecting a paycheck. Knowing Marge Motter, she was working. She was working there the entire time. And at the entire time that she was working at Ideal, she loved working there. They loved her. And the entire time she was working there, she was working as our Sunday school teacher, our choir leader, our pianist, right here at Broadway Christian Church. And all of us are better for having her in our lives. To close, I'd like to share something. Our former pastor, Reverend Mike, he sent me something. He lives in West Virginia now, and unfortunately was not able to make it today. However, he wanted me to read this to you, and this is what the eulogy was with, because I thought this was very good. It is not so much stories as it is abiding passions that I remember about Marge Motter. First and foremost, Marge Motter loved Jesus. She was our sister in Christ, and she served him with her other passions. We talked about talents before. And she knew her talents. She knew the talents that God gave her. Marge loved music. She was in the choir when I first came to the church. She was also very active in barbershop music. It was lively, and it took someone who could sing well to participate. And God bless Marge Motter. She had a beautiful voice, and she could sing. Both she and Al were very active. Later, Marge became our pianist and our choir director. She even put up with me for a while as a member of the choir. And if you knew Mike Frank, you knew it took a heart of gold and a lot of patience to have him in the choir.